Imagine this. The best pasta sauce you have ever tasted sits abandoned on a plate. Wasted sauce. That is a tragedy. If only you had used Barilla al Bronzo pasta. Its bronze-cut texture holds your sauce and scoops up every last drop. The Italians call that scarpetta. Capture sauce the Italian way. Barilla al Bronzo. Click or tap the banner to find out more.
Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 195 of Chalk Talk. I am your host, Shane Haff. You can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. I am joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've heard him on the Tough Cover radio show. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. Mark Henry Jr. NFL. Mark, how are you doing today?
Got to get the NFL football guy first and foremost, even though I have a basketball jersey and a baseball hat on.
All right, absolutely. You know, I actually, if I'm being honest, I don't even see you at the moment. I had you covered up with other tabs. So there's no excuse other than slipping into habit while I try to figure out our new streaming platform. Those of you that are watching live, I hope this is going out live because maybe it's not. I don't know. We got switched over to a new streaming platform that's absolute garbage. So hopefully you guys are even going to see and hear this. I don't know. They told me it's better. It's not. It's terrible, but we're going to work with it and see what kind of a show we can come up with today. I do know that it is not currently live streaming to my Twitter like it's supposed to be. Hopefully it's going other places. So enough of that though, Mark. Tell the people what we're doing today.
We're ranking head coaches. And when we rank quarterbacks, you can look at other quarterback rankings across different websites, and there's minor differences in certain guys who maybe Shane is a bit higher, maybe I'm a bit higher, maybe we're both a bit higher on. But with head coaches, it's all over the board. So any head coach list you look at is, I think, going to be completely different. And I know mine feels like it's going to be a lot different than most, even Shane's. I feel like me and Shane do a lot of lists and back and forth things. We usually have pretty similar lists. I bet we have a couple massive differences coming up.
You know, so full disclosure here, I have seen Mark's list. He has not seen mine. And Mark, there was a few that surprised me on yours, and there was a couple of my rankings. There's one of my rankings in particular that I thought you were going to give me a lot of pushback on, and we ended up ranking that person at the exact same slot. So that's going to be interesting to talk about when we get there later. And there was a few others that kind of surprised me a bit, but like I said, Mark hasn't seen any of these. So we're going to dive in and just see where we're at. And I think we're going to go 1 to 27, and we'll just kind of talk about a guy together where we have him. So Mark, who is your number one head coach?
My number one head coach is different than what most are going to be. And honestly, I think you could make a really strong argument for 1 through 5 on my list. But this is a long-standing opinion of mine. We've talked about this on the show before, and I'm only more kind of emboldened by what Sean Payton just did with Bo Nix last season. Sean Payton is 170 and 105 over his 17-year career, obviously has a Super Bowl championship, has been to the playoffs 10 times, and even in Denver, showed up in Denver in what we thought, I mean, Shane and I made fun of Sean Payton for taking the job because of the cap situation and the roster situation. And we said, well, you know, the owners have a lot of money, so I guess, you know, you take the check. And he's come in there, and they went 8-9 in year one. And he was the butt of a lot of jokes in year one, despite going 8-9 with what we now know was a washed Russell Wilson and a pretty average to bad roster. And then he comes back with a rookie quarterback who nobody else believed in Bo Nix, who he probably overdrafted. And he had the best offensive line in football. They went 10-7. His rookie quarterback looked very much the part of an NFL starter. And here he is back in the mix. But this is about the fact that this guy has won 11 plus games 9 times. He's won double digit games 10 times, or actually 11 times. Like, this is just, I have said for a long time, I think this guy does the most with an average amount of talent to an above average amount of talent of any coach in the NFL.
Yeah, so I'm not far off of you there. I have Sean Payton as the number 2 guy on my list. So, like you said a lot of it, but took over a disaster team in 2023. Started 1-5, won 7 of the final 11 games. Got a quarterback most people did not believe in Bo Nix, and won 10 games last year. And of the 7 they lost, only 2 were by more than a score, and that was Buffalo and Baltimore, who were juggernauts in the AFC. So, and it's not just about Denver. Obviously, he was so good for so long in New Orleans, with an unconventional quarterback there too, and Drew Brees. And I mean, I don't think we have to say like he carried Drew Brees or anything, but he's been around unconventional quarterbacks his entire life, and he's been good everywhere he's ever been. So Sean Payton is number 2 for me, and he's only not number 1 for me because I have Andy Reid at number 1. And I know that you push back on that a little bit because of the Patrick Mahomes factor. At the end of the day, for me, they reached the Super Bowl in 3 straight seasons. They won all 12 one-score games that they played in. And yeah, like Patrick Mahomes is a huge part of it. But at the end of the day, it's just so hard to separate like quarterback and coach. And we talked about it with quarterback rankings. It's hard to separate quarterback from scheme and play caller sometimes. And they're also intertwined. Would Patrick Mahomes have had the success that he had without Andy Reid? He would have been really successful. I believe that. I think he would have been really successful almost anywhere that he could have landed. But having Andy Reid certainly didn't hurt. I think they've got a pretty mutually beneficial relationship. And so he's going to stay at number 1 for me, I think, for like the 3rd year in a row now.
Most people are going to put him 1, and I understand it. I just always push back because I think he's so inflated by having the greatest player I've ever seen in the sport. So I think that helps a lot. He was obviously a great coach beforehand. I have him 4th, so I'm not really saying too much here. And I think you could make an argument for him above anybody on my list. But you can kind of see with Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, and Lamar, their coaches on my list, I think I probably have lower than most people would have all 4 of those coaches. So I feel like I generally gravitate towards the coaches who shock me. Even when coming into a year, I think a team's going to win 5 or 6 games, and then they come out and win 10 or 11. Or I think that a team doesn't have a quarterback situation, and they come out and make the playoffs, or whatever the case may be. I feel like I gravitate towards those situations generally.
Yeah, that makes total sense. By the way, I should have mentioned this up front. This is bad hosting by me, but we are not ranking the first-year head coaches. So Brian Schottenheimer, Liam Cohen, Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, Kellen Moore have never been head coaches. We're not going to attempt to rank them here. So we're only going to be ranking 27 coaches. Maybe we'll talk about who we would prefer them over. Maybe we won't. Probably depends on how long this show goes. So that's my number 1 and 2. Mark, why don't you give me your number 2?
I'm back-to-back Sean at the top. I've got Sean McVay at number 2, and part of that is just, I each of the last couple of years, I've underrated their roster coming into the year, thinking they'd take a step back or thinking they'd have a disaster season. They lost Aaron Donald last year, the best defensive player in the sport, and I think they've won another game extra than they did the year before. He's obviously won a Super Bowl. He's been to another Super Bowl, been to the playoffs plenty of times, 7 out of 8 winning seasons in his 8 years in the league, which is funny because I actually feel like he's been around longer than 8 years. But Sean McVay, I think, has an argument for 1 on this list.
Yeah, I am more impressed. He's number 3 for me. I'm more impressed with what they've done in the last 2 seasons than I am with their Super Bowl win.
I agree.
Because which is strange, it's crazy, but like they majorly reset the roster after 2022, and they've won 10 games both season. And I went on Philly Sports Table podcast with Jeff Warren last week maybe, and he asked me about NFC contenders, and I said the NFC team I'm most afraid of this season is the Rams. And so to go from resetting the roster back-to-back 10-win seasons to who I would view as the number 2 team in the NFC going into this season. And it's not just that. He also did it while massively changing his approach from an outside zone heavy run game to a man heavy run game, gap scheme type stuff. And so for him to totally change his approach alongside of his roster turnover, that's really impressive to me. Sean McVay is incredible, very deserving of number 3 on the list. Number 2, you won't get an argument from me for having him that high either. I think he's fantastic.
It's funny you said LA is the team that that is our number 1 contender, because I think the top 3 teams, and I think we're probably both a little lower on Detroit coming into this year with the loss of the coordinators. The top 3 teams that come to my head are the 3 teams we beat in the playoffs. It's Green Bay, LA, and Washington that come to my head, which is pretty funny.
Yeah. So that is my 1 through 3. Your number 3 is still hanging out here. So tell me who you've got at number 3.
It took a lot in me to just not put him at 1, but obviously a rough year. Kyle Shanahan, who I've said for a long time, I think is the most genius play caller I've ever seen. And people love to like tweet out his record, because the first 2 years, I think he won either 9 or 10 games and obviously lost a ton of games. He's 60-40 with 4 NFC title trips and 2 Super Bowl trips in the last 6 years. I know he doesn't have the ring, but 2 Super Bowl trips, 4 NFC Championship appearances, obviously 2 bad years, but even that leading to 60-40 is a pretty darn good winning percentage when you consider that there's 2 bad years in there. So took Brock Purdy with the last pick of the draft, and he's now, one of the top 5, top 10 highest paid quarterbacks in the sport. We can talk about the impact of that at a later date, but I think Kyle Shanahan, he was like the Philly Voice did a list with all their guys ranking, and I think it's like 5 or 6 people ranking it, and Shanahan was like 16th behind like Sean McDermott. It's like, what are we doing? Like, I get that he doesn't have a ring. Sean McDermott certainly doesn't have a ring, and has had less playoff success in more attempts, I think, than Kyle Shanahan. But Kyle Shanahan, there are warts to his coaching, I'd say, but I'd also say, he's done some incredible things over the last 6 years.
Yeah, so I've got Shanahan down at number 6, and I think I agree with you. I think he's the best offensive mind in the NFL, but I continue to maintain that he isn't just neutral at the other aspects of the game that are important for a head coach, which player development / culture and game management, but that he is actively very bad at them. Mm-hmm. Over the last 3 seasons, the 49ers have the second lowest go rate in the NFL, which is basically 4th downs where you should go for it. They have gone for it on the second lowest percentage of those over the last 3 years, ahead of only the Patriots, who had old man Belichick, which it's understandable. The super old guy is set in his ways, and the more conservative approach, the defensive guy, and then a first-year coach who got fired in Gerard Mayo. So I think he continues to be very bad at 2 of the 3 elements of being a head coach, and maybe they're not as impactful as the one he's really good at. But I can't put him above some of the other guys on this list as long as some of those problems persist. So I've got him down at number 6. I knew you probably wouldn't like that one a ton, but that's not the one that I meant.
I expected lower than 6.
Yeah, that's not the one that I was mentioning that I thought you were going to give me a lot of pushback on. So we will continue to journey towards that one. So let's go on to my number 4. Looks like he comes in at number 8 on your list. It's John Harbaugh.
Yeah.
To me, the Ravens they are perpetual contenders, and they've just continued to fall short in the playoffs. Consistently emerging from a really tough division. They haven't lost a game by more than 1 score since the end of 2022 in a game their starters rested to begin with. So they're just a tremendously well-coached team. And, at some point, there's got to be a little bit of docking for John Harbaugh and for Lamar Jackson for not making those deep postseason runs and having that little bit of that we choke in the playoffs mantra. But I'm not all the way there yet. And, lest we forget, a year ago, I guess maybe we say 2 years ago now, in 2023, they were in the AFC Championship game. And so I think that's a little overstated. I mean, sure, you'd like for them to get over the hump to a Super Bowl, but that's something the Bills haven't done yet either. So I've got Harbaugh at number 4. He's down at number 8 for you. What are your thoughts about me having him up at 4?
It's not certainly not crazy. I'd have to look at who my highest ranked guy is. I think there's one name that we'll get to that I think deserves to be higher than Harbaugh at this point. But John Harbaugh is interesting. I do think he's another guy who's been carried a little bit by having an incredible quarterback. I'll give him a little bit more credit than that because obviously he had the era before that, won a Super Bowl with Joe Flacco. I'd say those teams were pretty elite earlier on when he first took over. That team was honestly elite and ready to go. And I will give him credit. He's gotten really aggressive over the last couple of years in terms of going for it on 4th, going for it on 2, and it feels like it's bit him more than it's helped him, to be honest. Even though I think we've both most of the time agreed with him doing what he's doing in those situations. But I just think that there's a couple guys on this list higher that I think John Harbaugh, I look at, this is a cross sport comparison for people out there that Shane won't even know who I'm talking about here. A little bit Rob Thompson-ish from the Phillies, a little bit like the Phillies manager. The Phillies have a really good roster, really good team. And guess what? Rob Thompson wins 95 games every year. And we're in the playoffs every year. And we've had some playoff success, some playoff failures. But I don't necessarily think Rob Thompson's adding a ton to make that Phillies team what it is. I think he's kind of keeping the train on the tracks and a good clubhouse guy, a guy that the players like. I kind of feel the same way about Harbaugh. I don't watch the Ravens and think oh my God, this team is just so innovative with the way that they coach and the chances that they take. And I guess that flies in the face of what I just said about going for it. But I just think a lot of it ends up just being hey, Lamar, go figure it out. On offense especially, and then on defense I think a lot of it is we have really elite guys like Roshan or Kyle Hamilton and Roquan, and I don't think John Harbaugh is necessarily if the Ravens are a 12-win roster, I think they're going to win 12 or 13 games. I don't think he's leveling them up. I guess maybe that's wrong, and it might be unfair.
Yeah. I think we could probably have similar conversations about the guy that we both have at number 5. But before we do that, I've got Daniel chiming in on YouTube, which is great because it lets me know this is actually going to YouTube. So that's a win. Says you can literally just ignore every 3rd round pick the 49ers make. I know this because at least 2 of them are on the Eagles practice squad. So yeah, there's some GMing stuff going on with the 49ers as well. I'm not sure that's on Kyle Shanahan, though. So let's go to number 5. And at number 5, we both have Nick Sirianni. And I think you could have part of that conversation about is he leveling that team up? He's so difficult to rank. I was totally out on him last offseason. I thought he should have been fired. But what he did this season was unbelievable. And I would like to see him tighten up some game management a bit more for a non-play calling coach. Now, over the last 3 years, the Eagles are first in the league in that go rate I talked about with Kyle Shanahan, but there's still some inconsistencies in game management. And maybe I'm nitpicking because it's my team, but there's no doubt he's the right coach for Philadelphia in terms of culture management. And so often you see, especially with receivers, good receivers, you can see, issues, diva things going on. And you don't really get that out of AJ Brown. I mean, I know there's been some things media has blown up, but I think overall Sirianni does a really good job managing the different personalities in the locker room. And it's always a bit hard to peel back the layers of what is he doing behind the scenes and to quantify that in the way that we can game management and play calling. But there's no doubt the culture in Philadelphia is really good. And Nick Sirianni is at the heart of a lot of that.
Yeah, I think it's hard to make an argument for John Harbaugh over Nick Sirianni. Because at this point, they both have the same amount of rings. Sirianni's coached for so much shorter. Sirianni's had close to the same level of like a percentage of elite seasons, I'd say, in his mix. And for whatever I think about Jalen, he won. It's like what he's done with Jalen over the last X amount of years, I think is more impressive than whatever you could say Harbaugh's done with Lamar, who I think is a better quarterback. So I think I feel strongly about Nick over Harbaugh.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess I look at the sustained success of Harbaugh in that respect, and I'm not sure what his coordinator life has looked like. I know Nick's had to replace both of his coordinators every season out of the last 3 years. So
Baltimore had
there's
Roman for that long stretch, and then it's been Monken.
Did he go? Yeah, did he go straight from Roman to Monken?
Yeah.
So he's had a nice run there at coordinator, but yeah, I think for me it's a little bit of the longevity of Harbaugh over Nick at this point, but they're pretty close, and they're both game managers, not play callers, that sort of thing, and so there's definitely an argument to be made, and I could definitely flip the two next year if they both had similar seasons again to last year.
Another guy I feel strongly about over John Harbaugh, his brother Jim. Give me Jim Harbaugh at 6. Jim Harbaugh is not a guy I'm a personal fan of. Michigan coach. I'm a Notre Dame fan, so I hate the guy. But in the NFL, he's 55, 25, and 1. He's had 4 11-win seasons out of the 5 times he's been a coach in the NFL. I think we forget how good he was in San Fran with Alex Smith, and then with Colin Kaepernick, and then now again, that team last year, the Chargers, gutted a lot of their roster, got rid of a ton of veterans to clear up their cap space, and I thought they were going to be a bad football team, and they would, retool and be back for this year. They go out and they win 11 games. I think Jim Harbaugh is incredible. I think what he did this year was amazing, one of the best coaching jobs we've seen in recent memory. And now I think this roster is fully ready to compete, and I think Jim Harbaugh could even vault up this list because I have them going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I have Jim Harbaugh at number 9. He's been very good, right? All the accolades, nearly won a Super Bowl in 2012, won a national championship at Michigan. The Chargers surged to an 11-win team last year in his first season there. I will say there's just he was phenomenal in San Francisco, and then they still fired him. And then he went to Michigan and won a national championship. But by the way, they blatantly cheated all the way there. And then he came back to the NFL. And so it's is it going to last? Is he going to be able to stick in Los Angeles? Now, I will say, in hindsight, it probably swings in his favor a little bit that his issues in San Francisco were with a. Do you know who the GM in San Francisco he was fighting? Yeah, he's fighting with Trent Baalke.
And then they hired Chip Kelly, who they fired after a year, and then Jim Tomsula, who they fired after a year in the 2 years following that.
Yeah, so in hindsight, if the cheating thing in Michigan isn't why he left, if the cheating thing at Michigan hadn't happened and he just came back to the NFL, I might have him up a little more. I do wonder how long he sticks here. And so that's my only concern with him. I think he's a phenomenal coach, though.
Interesting comment from our guy, Joe Chick. And I'll just break the news. It's going to make a lot of people upset about Mike Tomlin not in the top 5. And I think he agrees that he shouldn't be. I'm not close to Mike Tomlin on my list, to be clear.
Shall we just talk Mike Tomlin?
Yeah, sure.
It was brought up. So where do you have Mike Tomlin?
Let me make sure I'm giving the right number here. I have him 15. I have Mike Tomlin at 15.
If you were going to guess what position I have Mike Tomlin in, what would you guess?
I think he was the guy that you were surprised I was as low on as you. 15?
I have him at 14, and he's actually not the guy. But yeah, let's have the Mike Tomlin conversation. So go ahead. You've got him down at 15. I've got him at 14. Why is that?
It's hard to have without a couple, I think, talking about a couple guys above him, and we'll get to those guys. But if the argument for him is just that he keeps the train on the tracks and they go, they make the playoffs every year and he wins 9 or 10 games, I think there's actually a surprising amount of people who are, if not there on that same plane of kind of always making the playoffs and always being competitive, really darn close with a little bit more kind of elite recent success than Tomlin. So, Tomlin, there's no doubt about it. He's a worthy NFL head coach. We have him in the middle of the pack of the head coaches. I think that's where he is at this point. The coordinator hires have been incredibly soft, I'd say, over the last decade. They have not taken any real chances or swings on any innovative minds or any young. I saw an article about it, but they don't hire young like position coaches or coordinators. It's always like retreads and older guys and guys Tomlin's worked with before, instead of bringing in new ideas and new minds. And if you look at like the Mike Tomlin coaching tree, it doesn't exist. Like it's not a thing that exists. So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, there's something to be said for stability and the never had a losing season thing, but he also hasn't won a playoff game in 8 years, including 5 straight opening round losses. And that includes a 2017 season where they won 13 regular season games and a 2020 season where they won 12 regular season games. So it's not just that he's getting to the playoffs with a 9-win team and then losing like he should in wild card weekend. He had a 13 and a 12-win team in that stretch that also lost their first playoff game. And, you know, at a certain point, I'm not here for mediocrity. And that's what the Steelers have been. And they were good when they had Ben Roethlisberger, and they have been blah since. And I mean, they took the swing in the first round on Kenny Pickett. They're taking the swing on Aaron Rodgers this year, but at the end of the day, you know, he's done some great things. We've seen receivers totally go off the rails when they leave Pittsburgh. And so there's a lot you could say about him as a culture guy, but at the end of the day, he's had no postseason success basically in the last decade.
And then for my number 7 guy, I think this is an interesting way to pinpoint this. I have him ranked 7th, but if I think if I was an NFL owner and I had, let's say, like in a Madden franchise, they throw all the guys back in the draft and you do a fantasy draft. Let's say after that or before, either after or before the draft. It doesn't matter. This is semantics. I'm talking to talk. But let's say that they also threw the head coaches in a pool and you got to draft the head coaches. And I got the first pick of like, who am I going to draft? And I'm thinking long-term and short-term, all of it. Kevin O'Connell's the pick, I think. Because you go down the list, like, Sean Payton's older and an a-hole. Sean McVay is probably going to, you know, do TV in a couple of years. It seems like he teases at it constantly. Kyle Shanahan's he's prickly. I think he's like hard to deal with and probably has a big enough ego that he's not going to coalesce with any new GM. Like Andy Reid could retire any minute. Nick Sirianni back to the same point as Sean Payton might be a little bit of an A-word. Jim Harbaugh, total weirdo. And then you get to Kevin O'Connell, who's 40 years old. And Kevin O'Connell, do you know what Kevin O'Connell's record is in 3 years, Shane?
I know, it's really good.
34-17. And that's with the 7-10 season in there. Obviously 13-4 and 14-3. But Kevin O'Connell, 667 winning percentage in 3 years with Kirk Cousins in 2022, who I'd say was probably like, the 10th best quarterback, probably something around there. In 2023, goes 7-10. I actually think that was an impressive 7-10 because he had like 5 quarterbacks. He had Nick Mullins, he had Josh Dobbs, he had Kirk Cousins, he had a ton of guys. And then you have this year where he goes 14-3 with the ghost of Sam Darnold, who people had wrote off and you know basically wrote the obituary on his career for. And now here he is with JJ McCarthy, and I'm done doubting him for fantasy purposes. Not a fantasy show, but I'm buying stock in JJ McCarthy as a late round quarterback because I think if you're a quarterback with any level of skill, Kevin O'Connell is going to get the best out of you. So Kevin O'Connell, what he's done early in his career is incredible.
Yeah, the Vikings traded up to take a quarterback in the first round of the draft. And then he got injured and played 0 snaps, and they still won 14 games. And so moving through adversity in that way, I think he's an elite play caller on offense. I also think he brought in a top-notch defensive coordinator that will never be a head coach again. at some point he's going to catch a break at quarterback, but he's pushing the buttons right. I think Kevin O'Connell's fantastic. And I agree with you in kind of your assessment of like fantasy draft of coaches. Where would you go? I think that's probably a good place to land. So let's go to my number 8. And I have at number 8, Dan Campbell. And Dan Campbell's a guy that it's hard. Like, there's obviously been a massive culture turnaround in Detroit, but we're in the like wait and see phase now, because now he has to replace Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. And so he's been really successful. We're about to find out how much of it is related to him and his ability to hire and set a culture, and how much of it was related to having a really good OC and a really good DC. And so I just don't know the answer to that right now. And so I've got him at number 8. Could you argue for him higher? I mean, hey, if Detroit is a Super Bowl contender this year with 2 new coordinators, then he'll absolutely be higher next year. But I need to see that first. So that's my reservation with Dan Campbell. He also gets some credit for being one of the guys on the forefront of aggression. He pushes it too far sometimes and goes full tilt. But without guys like Doug Peterson and Dan Campbell, I don't know that the fourth down discourse is where it is today in the NFL. They kind of pushed that forward.
We're going to learn.
Yeah.
We're going to find out on Dan Campbell where he should be after this year. Feels like any ranking feels wrong. You either have him too high, too low. There's no way of knowing, I feel like, where he should rank right now. I will say, like, he's 2-2 in the playoffs. He's made 1 conference championship. I feel like he's being ranked above a lot of people just because of recent success. Kyle Shanahan's had a lot of recent success. He's ranked below him on plenty of lists. Kevin O'Connell, I think what he's done is way more impressive than what Dan Campbell's done so far. I think what Jim Harbaugh did last year was more impressive. I think that there's a couple names that are about to come up on my list too. They have made runs maybe to the conference finals or conference championships, basketball mode. Conference championships that have had just as much success as Dan Campbell, if not more, in the playoffs. So I think Dan Campbell's overrated on some lists, but hard to know where he should be.
All right, and you have him down at number 12. So that brings us to your number 9. Talk to me about Pete Carroll.
Yeah, this is a guy I know that I'm going to be higher on than most, but Pete Carroll's a guy who I've always thought has been the most underrated coach in the sport since the exact moment that Russell Wilson threw an interception in the Super Bowl on the goal line. And Pete Carroll should have ran the ball there. But I think ever since that moment, he has been underrated. He is 170, 120, and 1 in his 18 years in the NFL. He went 137, 89, and 1 in his 14 years in Seattle, 61% winning percentage. And over the last 12 years as a coach, he's had 11 winning seasons. So Mike Tomlin has that whole thing where he never goes under 500. Well, Pete Carroll has had 11 of 12 winning seasons, and he also has a Super Bowl ring in there alongside of a Super Bowl appearance and alongside of another NFC Championship appearance in that run. And I know that he took a year off, but even let's not act like the end of Pete Carroll was some embarrassing stretch. He went 7-10, 9-8, and 9-8. And he got fired, and we were surprised he got fired. And I was making an argument in 2022, the first Geno year, that they went 9-8, they made the playoffs. I think he deserved Coach of the Year that year, or at least recognition, or at least some votes for it, because that was a team we were expecting to go 4-13 coming into the year. They gave up on Russ. They were taking a chance on Geno, who nobody thought was an NFL starter at the time, and they go 9-8, 9-8. And guess what? The Seahawks were the exact same team this year with much more talent all over the board. In my opinion, they went out and spent some money, and they went out and made a couple draft picks. I think they had more talent this year than they had the last couple of years with Pete. They're the same team with Mike McDonald, despite having more talent. So I think Pete Carroll is going to immediately step into Las Vegas and make them immediately competent.
Yeah, I've got him down at number 13. And he's a guy that a few years ago I would have had higher on this list. I I don't know. I wonder if the game has started to pass him by a little bit. I still think he's a good coach. I question, if his style is going to work long term now. And so that's why I've got him a little bit lower. Again, a couple years ago, I would have had him higher than this. What I can't wait for, and I mean, this isn't going to happen, but it'd be amazing storyline. I wish they played the Seahawks in the regular season this year, and they don't. So just imagine with me, they meet up in the Super Bowl, and after the Raiders win the Super Bowl over the Seahawks, he drops the line that the Seahawks wrote me off, but I didn't write back.
I think he can drop
with Geno Smith standing right beside him, hoisting the MVP trophy, Super Bowl MVP. That'd be hilarious. It's not going to happen, but if there's a script writers, if they want to get on that one, that'd be great. So yeah, again, a couple years ago, I would have had him a little higher. I honestly just wonder if like some of his defensive philosophies have sort of become dated, and that's my biggest fear for him moving forward.
At 10, I've got Matt LaFleur, who I just think it's pretty impressive how he's kind of transferred from the Aaron Rodgers era to this Jordan Love era. I think, you'd like to see a little bit more playoff success. And you mentioned that LA is the team you're most afraid of. For me, it's Green Bay. If I had to pick the one team I'm most afraid of, it's Green Bay. It was Green Bay all of last year, and it's still Green Bay.
Yeah, I've got him at the exact same spot. Like you said, going from Rodgers to Matt LaFleur, and I wonder how much he trusts like Jordan Love, because they're an exceptionally high run rate team. I feel like he's kind of conservative as a play caller, not in a we won't go for it on fourth down way, but like leaning into the run game, while Jordan Love is like this insane gunslinger that does stupid things that work out fantastic sometimes and implode other times. I wonder if you put a truth serum in Matt LaFleur, if he'd be like, oh, I can't stand that guy. Yeah, I would like, he's one of those guys I just need to see some more sustained success. But at his age, given what he's worked with, never having really the number one receiver with Jordan Love, being top 10 is nothing to sneeze at. I think he's a really good coach.
Coming up next, I've got a new coach, I guess Pete Carroll's a new coach as well, but I got Mike Vrabel at 11, who is, in my opinion, better Dan Campbell. And I know Dan Campbell's more aggressive and more kind of forward thinking. I think Mike Vrabel, his conference title appearances in Tennessee impressed me more than what Dan Campbell did in Detroit with two elite coordinators and elite talent all over the field. Those Tennessee teams are the worst teams of the last 20 years to make a conference title team, and he did it twice. But Mike Vrabel, I think, not a modern guy, maybe not wouldn't be like my first pick. Everyone knows I would always hire an offensive head coach when we talk about this, but I still feel like I have to give him credit, and he's another guy. It's hard to see New England not being immediately competent.
Yeah, I have him at 15. He was an overachiever relative to his roster in Tennessee for years. He got scapegoated for awful managerial decisions.
Awful.
And now he lands in New England, so we'll see. That's kind of where I'm at with Vrabel. I need to see him do it in New England, and I have a lot of confidence that he will. Honestly, I probably should have flipped him and Mike Tomlin, and I might go back and do that. Actually, I'm just going to do it on the fly here. I'm flipping Mike Vrabel and Mike Tomlin. I'm going to bump Vrabel up to 14 and bring Tomlin down to 15, because I'd much rather have Mike Vrabel coaching my football team. So I think he's a really good coach that has never really been in a good situation. And New England's not one either. But if you think Drake May is the future, and I think he is, it's a better situation than he ever really had in Tennessee. So we'll see.
Definitely.
Who's okay? Let's go to my number 11. I've got D'Amico Ryans. He checks in at number 16 for you. He's hard to judge. 2 years, like huge turnaround in year one, resets the culture. They take a big step back in year two. I think, there's the offensive line was horrific. Injuries were horrific. It's hard to tell. Like so many of these guys you're judging on longevity of a career, and D'Amico Ryans has 2 years. But what he did in year one, I still believe in. And, he's a big wait and see guy too. Let's see what they do this year as he's hiring some new coordinators and things. So I've got D'Amico at number 11.
And
You got him at 16.
I think I'm going to just go with my 13 to kind of have like a tandem conversation. And it kind of shows like my personal biases, I guess, and how weirdly I evaluate head coach, because Shane Steichen in the same division is a guy who is probably on the hot seat. I actually thought he might get fired last season, but he's went 17-17 through 2 years, while D'Amico Ryans has been 20-14 in the same stretch. But weirdly, I think the 17-17 with the quarterback play that they've had in Indy is even more impressive than what Houston's done. And I know that's a little bit cherry picking because that Houston team was not very good when D'Amico took over. I'm probably not giving D'Amico enough credit for getting that team to 10 wins. But now that they're at 10 wins, they kind of kept it there and didn't improve this season. I was a little let down by what happened in Houston this year. I thought that both sides of the ball would level up. And I feel like both sides of the ball leveled down, even though they won the same amount of games. I think a lot of that had to do with how easy the schedule was. With Shane Steichen, them almost, I mean, they were a non-dropped pass away from probably being in the playoffs in his first year as a head coach, where Gardner Minshew took 80% of the snaps at quarterback. And then last year, they went 8-9 with their quarterback asking out of games and giving them, when he was in, the worst quarterback play in the league, and then having a backup who was 80 years old coming in and trying to pick up pieces, who was doing a better job than the young guy was. And I just feel so bad for Steichen, because I don't think he's ever going to get properly evaluated as a head coach, because now here he is again with Daniel Jones coming into the year. Even Anthony Richardson's hurt coming into the year. So he's going to get fired. I think that's pretty clear. They've now Jim Irsay died. They have the new ownership. His daughter's coming in. They're probably going to want to make their mark and make their hire. I feel like the Colts are the number one candidate in the NFL to clear house after this year in terms of head coach and GM, maybe.
Well, if they do that, it's a net positive if they get Chris Ballard out of town. So
yeah,
if that's what it takes, if you got to lose Steichen to get rid of Ballard, so be it.
I generally don't think teams should do this. I really do think they should fire Ballard and hold on to Steichen and get a GM to work with Steichen. In worst case, you just have that GM pick his guy in a year or two anyway. But I really do think when you watch the Colts, I think Steichen is like leveling them up from like a 5 or a 6 win team to be competitive as an 8 or a 9 win team.
Yeah. Being 500 with the disaster he's had to manage at quarterback's impressive. And you mentioned the disaster remains as they're going to start Daniel Jones this year. And at some point, they have got to figure out quarterback, but that's Chris Ballard's job. And it's one he's failed for years. It's one we've been critical of him for years. And so, I have Steichen at 16. You have him at 13. I just don't think he's ever gotten a fair shake in Indianapolis. And to your point, I don't think he's going to, because I think he's going to get fired midseason this year.
And it's funny with Chris Ballard. I was thinking about this because I feel like a lot of the time me and you do this whole thing where we kill Chris Ballard, but it's like, but he does a good job with the rest of the roster, and like he does a good job drafting, and he nails all this other stuff. But like at a certain point, it's a little bit like in fantasy football. If you don't draft, let's say you don't draft running backs, right? Like you're going the 0 RB strategy. I know you're not a fantasy guy, Shane, but that's a new thing these days. The kids these days like to do this 0 RB strategy where they get 4 receivers in the first 5 rounds, and you get a stud quarterback and a stud tight end, and you just think, oh, I'll figure it out at running back. And you look at the roster, and you look, oh my God, I love my quarterback, and oh my God, I love my tight end. Oh, my receivers are the best in the league. But yeah, it's because you completely ignored maybe the most important position, or like the thing that you have to devote all these resources to. I think it's pretty easy to, when you have a million swings at the rest of your roster and your quarterback sucks and you're not doing anything to improve it, I think it's a little easier to kind of improve the rest of the roster when you're not paying $30 million for a quarterback ever, or very rarely investing a high pick. They did it once with Richardson, but I don't know if that made sense, but I feel like maybe we give him too much credit for the rest of the stuff. And even I don't know. That was a roundabout way to say Chris Ballard sucks.
Yeah, you can only get so much credit when you routinely fail at literally the most
Yes.
important position in professional sports. So it doesn't matter how good the rest of the roster is if you can't land the quarterback. So yeah, but not a GM ranking show, but it does impact, I think, Steichen, and it's going to impact his job. So
He's gonna get fired.
yeah, he's going to get fired. Maybe he'll land back in Philly. Who
I would
knows?
love that.
We'll see. So my number 12, I've got Todd Bowles. I think you've got him at number 18. What a weird career. He is the head coach for the only losing season of Tom Brady's career. They still won the division. But then they won 2 divisional titles in a row after Brady retired, resurrecting the career of Baker Mayfield. And I know Todd Bowles doesn't get the credit for the QB play because he's a defensive guy, but his defenses are always good. I just think, I mean, he's in a bad division, but he's won it 3 years in a row, and their defense is always good, which is the biggest thing he's responsible for. And he's done well with OCs, and he's going to have to do it again this year, and we'll see how that plays out. But Todd Bowles, and maybe it's just that he's always had the Eagles number. Maybe that inflates him a little bit for me, but I like Todd Bowles.
Who did they hire as their OC this year? I feel like I totally missed that. Whatever the cycle was. I've got Bowles at 18. I have a tier from about I'd say 15 through 19 that I think you could jumble it any way you want. Personally, like if you told me Todd Bowles is a better coach than Mike Tomlin, I have no problem with that. Same thing with Tomlin above or Todd Bowles above D'Amico Ryans. The one thing I'll say, it's funny. I think it just goes to show how bad the NFC South is. Todd Bowles is 27-24 as Tampa's head coach. He's won the division 3 times. Like, yeah, it's pretty unbelievable. They've won at 8-9, 9-8, and 10-7. He goes up one every year, so they'll win 11 games this year.
They hired Grant Udinsky, assistant quarterback coach for the Vikings, to be their OC.
OC guy.
So outside the box hire, wasn't even a QB coach. He was an assistant QB coach.
They've nailed it. They've nailed the OC hires. Even Leftwich briefly. I guess that wasn't his hire. That was Arians' hire. Even Leftwich, he was the OC when they went to the Super Bowls or won the Super Bowl. So, yeah, they've nailed a lot of OC hires.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about Dan Quinn. You've got him at 17. I've got him at 18. He's weird, right? Like, I hated the hire. I didn't think he was a good head coach in Atlanta. I thought everything fell apart when Shanahan left. I thought he was a good DC in Dallas. And then he goes to Washington and seemingly nails the offensive coordinator hire. We'll see. I mean, well, the jury's out on that still. We'll see. But
he nailed it. But the defense wasn't good. That's like the weird
part
of it.
It is, but the defense also just doesn't have a lot.
No,
the cupboard's pretty bare, and so I'm willing to give him a pass on that. Is just to come in, nail the OC hire. Seemingly, Cliff Kingsbury has a habit of fading, and we'll see. But I also think he threaded that needle of an OC that's probably not going to get poached based on his previous record. Although, if they go to a conference championship game again this year and Jaden Daniels looks like he did last year, I'm sure some team is going to come calling. But I hated the hire for them. It's worked out really well. And with another season like this season, and maybe one where the defense takes a step forward, like you mentioned, it's crazy, but he could get into 11, 12, 13 range for me potentially. So that really surprised me, especially where I was last year on him.
Yeah, I think it's so hard to rank. He was a hire I hated. I hated his run in Atlanta. I thought he held back those teams despite making the Super Bowl. And then last year, it's like, yeah, he had that huge year, but the defense wasn't really the reason for it. But obviously, I think he's got an attitude and a personality that guys want to play for and that guys like. So definitely have to give him credit there.
Yeah. All right. Well, my number 17 is Mike McDonald, and I think you've got him at 22. He's a tough one because is a first-year head coach last year, and honestly, again, the fact I wouldn't hire a defensive head coach aside, I liked him as a head coaching candidate. The team basically stayed the same in his first year as you transition from a guy that had been there forever in Pete Carroll. And so I just need to see more from him. So I just kind of left him middle of the pack.
Yeah, I don't think he did anything. Like, I think he completely was milquetoast. There are like some things out there that he just like doesn't connect with players. There's like some weird disconnect with him and players out there. So I feel like that's stuck in my head a little bit, and I'm probably underrating him maybe. But I'm not a Mike McDonald guy. I don't expect. I think Seattle's gonna have a bad year this year. I'm out on the Seahawks.
Well, yeah, Sam Darnold's their quarterback. That's not going to go well.
It is unbelievable that they made that choice. Like I feel like we didn't in the time it happened appreciate it enough or talk about it enough that they chose to downgrade at quarterback and spend more money to do it.
Yeah. By the way, can I just rant about QB rankings for a minute? Did you see Charles McDonald's QB rankings that he put out?
I did not.
Okay, so I used to enjoy his content. Like I used to think it was good, but he came out with his top 10 QBs and Geno Smith was number 8. And of course, Jalen Hurts wasn't on the list, but that's not the real issue for me. I feel like I'm a Geno Smith truther, but a top 8 quarterback doesn't get traded for a 3rd round pick to make room to go sign Sam Darnold. And it's not just that the Seahawks didn't think that he was a top 8 quarterback. The Raiders didn't either and neither does Geno because he signed a deal to make him the 17th highest paid quarterback in the NFL. So the league told you what you thought. The player and his agent told you what they think. And we've got clowns on Twitter putting out top 10 rankings that are like, oh, Geno Smith is the number 8 quarterback in the NFL. It's just absurd. So
it's funny. I did the quarterback rankings on my radio show on Saturday. My co-host Sean Bernard, who I did not necessarily know or think was a Geno guy, put Geno 11. And I was expecting, I didn't look at his rankings before we did the show. And I was expecting like, oh, I've got Geno 15 or 16, whatever I have him. I'm going to have to defend this because I remember I did a radio show at, there was a great Philly, a card show where there was a lot of Eagles that were there. I think I sent it to you, but it's where I met Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, AJ Brown, a couple of the guys backstage from the Eagles. And what I did, that was the day that Geno got traded, that I was live streaming from there. And I started saying that I like Geno more than Darnold, who we knew at that point was probably going to Seattle. I like Geno more than Kyler. And I forget who my guest was at the time, but they were telling me I was crazy. And I remember there was people, we had like a little crowd watching us do the live radio show. And they were like, Geno over Kyler, are you nuts? Like I was getting yelled at. And I was like, oh, so I guess I'm the one who loves Geno and I'm the one who's high on Geno. It's funny you mentioned that though, because I don't know who it was, a different quarterback. Or no, it was Heed the Call. Heed the Call, a podcast I really like. And probably my favorite podcast, to be honest. Used to be around the NFL. They split off. They're with Underdog Sports now. And they just did their quarterback rankings. And I think they had 3 or 4 people. They were more so, they do a thing called the Dalton scale, which is anything above the Dalton scale or below the Dalton. If you're above the Dalton scale, you have your franchise quarterback. If you're below the Dalton scale, you don't have your franchise quarterback. If you're at the Dalton scale, you don't know what you have. You're kind of like, I'm stuck in both boats. It's kind of like what we talk about with the Tannehill in the quarterback equator. But they were like going through the names that they didn't have to bring up. It's like, oh, these names are well above the equator. And they said Geno. And everybody's like, yes. They didn't even like bring him up as the potential mid-level guy. Like they're saying he's a franchise quarterback. And I'm like, they chose Sam Darnold. Like, and I don't agree with it. I think Seattle was wrong to do that.
He is the line.
Be a top 10 guy.
Geno Smith is the equator. Geno Smith, Brock Purdy, like that's the QB equator now, I feel like.
And I'm a little higher on Purdy, so I think it's Geno.
Yeah.
I think it's Geno, or there was the one weird one. I think it's actually Bo Nix. I think, but it's weird to say that about a rookie after.
Yeah, it's got to be more than 1 year. But
but I do feel like he is like generic average quarterback, and I think like if you plugged anyone above him in the Denver offense, they'd be better, and below him, they'd be worse.
I hope that turns out to be right, because then we can say if you're below the line, you get nixed.
If you're below the line,
yeah, we can have some fun with that. So, anyways, Little tangent there. I don't even remember how we got into that. Honestly, now I have no clue how we got there.
But my number 14, and this is, in my opinion, I'm shocked you're lower on this guy than I am. Mike McDaniel. Mike. Oh wow, 25. Or I guess I shouldn't say I'm shocked I'm lower. I knew you were lower. But my opinion, Shane, is you can't be this low on McDaniel and Tua because we've had too many wins and too much success. I think it's either McDaniel's propping Tua up or Tua has propped McDaniel up, which I certainly don't think is
no.
the case.
Yeah,
I think McDaniel has been the victim of a quarterback who's extremely limited and talented at what he's talented at, but then also has missed a ton of games. I'd have to look over the last 3 years how many games Tua has missed, but Mike McDaniel's 28 and 23 in those 3 years, while he's had a quarterback who has, you don't know if his brain's gonna, he gets hit one game and then we're having like serious, brain discussions for a month before the guy plays again. Like it's got to be a weird situation for the coach. He's missed 10 games in the last 3 years, and McDaniel's still 28 and 23.
That's way less than I would have guessed that he missed.
It is. I agree. It is less than you'd think. He played 17 in 2023, but I think I could make a case that Mike McDaniel should be 9th on my list. I lowered him, but I really do think in a different situation, McDaniel could be much higher on this list.
Yeah. So the Tua point is fair. He just fell down my list because it seems like every monthly we have things coming out about the cesspool that is the culture in Miami around the team. And as the head coach, that ultimately falls under you. I love the Mike McDaniel sound bites. I was really high on him a couple years ago. I think he could be good somewhere else potentially. I feel like, it feels a little bit to me like when I was a first year teacher and I was a good teacher who didn't know how to manage a classroom. And by the time I figured it out, it was out of control and really hard to rein back in. I almost feel like McDaniel might just need a break and to go somewhere else and start from scratch because I'm not sure you can climb out of that. And I also, it's hard to separate out team building philosophy of the head coach and the GM, but if he is the one that's just pushed the speed, I feel like they've leaned too far that direction and they don't have the ability to be a hammer when they need to be. And that's a shortcoming of his if he's the one pushing that. And again, it's possible that he's just trying to push a flawed system as far as they can to maximize it, but it's innately flawed and just will always come up short. So the Dolphins as currently constructed are never going to win. There's too many culture things. There's too many quarterback things. There's too many scheme things. I almost feel like I need to see McDaniel somewhere else to fully evaluate him at this point.
I think that's fair.
So, so I was shocked at where I ended up putting him on the list, but a lot of it just had to do with the culture things. So, okay, let's go to number 19. This is the guy, Mark. This is the guy that I thought I would be quite a bit lower on. Sean McDermott. And I think we are both lower on him at number 19 than perhaps any national consensus would be. I think there's this perception that Sean McDermott's a good coach, and I just don't think he is. He's won a playoff game in 5 straight seasons. And so you might say, how could you have him below Mike Tomlin, who hasn't won a playoff game in 8 years? Sean McDermott has Josh Allen. And so that's part of it. He hasn't been able to get over the hump. Now that hump is Patrick Mahomes, so it's understandable. But for a defensive coach, his approach to the Chiefs in the playoffs last year was atrocious.
He's the hump.
He is the hump. And based off of that, which sounds stupid to say, based off watching the All-22 of the AFC Championship game, I feel very confident in saying the Bills will never win a Super Bowl with Sean McDermott at the helm.
I agree. I've been saying that for a long time. I think he's holding them back. I think Zach Taylor's holding Joe Burrow back. I think Sean McDermott is the most overrated coach in sports. I think I can make a case that he should be lower on my list. I gave him some credit just for keeping continuity and consistency in terms of keeping them at the top and always having them 10, 11 wins. When he had the weird 9/11 quotes that
Oh
came
my
out
gosh.
last year in 2023, and that was in the middle. I think they were like, what were they, like 5-6 or 4-6? They had a rough record, and they had to go on a crazy run at the end of that year to get to 11 wins and win that division and make the playoffs. I think the best thing that would have happened to Buffalo is when those weird quotes came out, if they would have fired him
Yeah.
and they would have promoted Joe Brady to head coach or whoever to head coach. I think they'd be a much better team if Joe Brady was their head coach or if they went outside and hired someone new. I think he's going to continue to hold them back. And I totally agree on your defensive scheme. I mean, it goes back to what was the exact situation again where the Chiefs, how many seconds did the Chiefs have? Was it 16 seconds after the Bills scored? And
Yeah.
all they had to do was just stop him from going 40 yards, and they like guarded the sidelines. And Leslie Frazier got blamed for it and scapegoated, and he got fired the next day. Sean McDermott's the head coach and very much a defensive guy, and I know he then became the big bad defensive coordinator, and he wasn't going to let someone else mess it up for him. And I'm not a Sean McDermott guy.
Yeah, well, and last year in the AFC Championship game, they basically just played cover one, the most obvious cover one ever, every snap. And it's like, I get like, let's play man coverage on the Chiefs receivers because they're not very good. But you're facing the best quarterback in the NFL. Maybe just like try 1 out of every 10 plays to not tell him exactly what you're doing before the snap and see if that helps. But yeah. Also, there's just a lot of different groups of people whose teamwork you could admire more than terrorists. So maybe workshop those quotes a little better. You mentioned Zach Taylor. He's my number 20. He's your number 24. So I threw him up here. I don't really have much to say about him other than I think they would have won that Super Bowl if they had a different head coach. So
I'm surprised he's up at 20 for you. I thought he'd be lower.
Yeah. I mean, the offense has still been really good. So, and they have had a good record with backup quarterbacks, which is why I left him a little higher.
That's fair.
When Joe Burrow has been injured, their record's been better than expected. So I do feel like you got to give him a little credit for that. Maybe he like raises the floor for bad quarterbacks and lowers the ceiling for good ones, which is maybe not where you want to be unless you have a backup in, but that's kind of where I had him. So you had him at 24. Anything else you want to throw out on him?
He's another guy we'll find out a lot about this year. They should have fired him. Absolutely should have fired him after last year.
Yeah. All right, well, let's go. We'll speed up here a little bit. Let's go to your number 20. He's number 22 for me. Talk to me about Brian Dable.
He made the playoffs with Daniel Jones. That's why he's not lower on the list. That's simply it. He went 9-7-1 with Daniel Jones. I think Daniel Jones is terrible, so give him some respect.
All right. I don't disagree. I think he's a guy that's just never had a quarterback, and I don't think he's ever going to have one because he's going to get fired before they get there.
Yeah. Well, you could go with Jameis, and then he'll have a star.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to 21. This one's interesting because, it's no surprise when we have a guy in the same spot at the very top or the very bottom, but 2 times in 3 spots here. At 19, we both had McDermott. At 21, we both had Dave Canales. And he's a guy you need to see more from, first-year head coach, but it seemed like Bryce Young started to figure some things out. And I would just say the Panthers weren't the dumpster fire they should have been based on their roster. And so for that reason, I'm not willing to put him at the dregs of NFL coaching, but as a 1-year head coach with a losing record, he hasn't earned a lot more than that, in my opinion.
It's really dumb reasons, but I like him. Like the press conferences, the way he interacts with dudes on the sideline, and they were more competitive than they should have been in a lot of games, I felt like. And obviously Bryce Young's turnaround, which I've talked about last week, and I talked about again on my radio show this weekend. Sean Bernard had Bryce Young 15th on our quarterback list, and I was like, whoa, we're going too far on the Bryce Young thing. We've gone way too far. But I do think Dave Canales resurrected him to at least a point where we want to see more of him, and we're not just done with him, which we were beforehand. So that's pretty much the whole reason for having him above McDonald. I think resurrecting Bryce Young might be more impressive than basically just repeating Pete Carroll's last season, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Well, 23, here's a guy that I think we probably both have lower than consensus. And again, in the exact same spot at 23, we both have Kevin Stefanski. So you want to talk about him first?
I've never thought he was like that great. He did an incredible job that year with Flacco to make the playoffs. I think that was just a bizarre year where they had a really good O-line, a great defense, and they pushed the right buttons. They had an easy schedule. It was mostly an easy schedule. If you go back and look at the teams Flacco beat, I remember he was beating up on bad teams. But obviously he had the year with Baker, but I think we can look back on that, and it's not like Kevin Stefanski was like extracting a good quarterback play out of a bad quarterback we see now. Like Baker has went on to be much better than he was with Stefanski. So I guess I think some of like the positive, the good faith that people have for Stefanski comes from kind of what he did early with Cleveland and making the Browns a thing and turning Baker into a thing initially. But I think looking back on that, it might be a little less impressive when we know now that he had a lot of good players on those rosters, and Baker has turned into a really good quarterback.
Yeah, he's had a really bad quarterback situation with the Deshaun Watson of it all. And he did break the playoff drought in 2020. It got them their first playoff win since 1999. But he did it with Baker, who he had a very publicly bad relationship with, who then went to Tampa and was in the top 10 of my QB ranking list. So although he's had a really bad quarterback situation, he is culpable in that quarterback situation. Like you look at Shane Steichen, who has had a terrible quarterback situation, but it wasn't his fault. Kevin Stefanski had a guy in the building that we both ranked top 10. I think we both ranked him top 10. And ran him off. Yeah. And so though he may not have been saying bring Deshaun Watson in, though that may have been a really bad ownership decision he was left out of, he still created the environment for that and ran out a quarterback. So I don't think he gets a pass for the bad quarterback situation. So I just got him down near the bottom. I don't think he's a good coach.
Bill Barnwell, by the way, suggested Baker for the Dalton scale. I think that's crazy after what we just saw from Baker last year. He was a top 5 quarterback last year, let alone like where we had him. I think we both had him 9th, but
prior to last year, I think that would make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's like ignoring what happened last season. And it was Dan Hansis on the show who had to be like, I think Baker had like 5,000 yards last year and like 40 touchdowns, like, or whatever his stats were. But it was, yeah, I think what Stefanski did early on in his Browns tenure is less impressive, colored by what we now know about Baker.
Yeah. I mean, he only threw for 4,500 yards last year.
4,500, yeah.
And 41 touchdowns.
I knew it was like a big round number.
Yeah. So, okay. At number 24, I have Jonathan Gannon. You have him at 25. I feel like we've talked about Gannon a lot. Nothing has really changed in Arizona. I expect nothing to change because they brought everybody back. And I feel like they're just going to perpetually be like a slightly below mid team.
No, you can make an argument for him for last place easily. I have a guy in last who's basically just like a TBD. We know nothing about. Part of me wants to put Raheem Morris above Jonathan Gannon.
Yeah,
switch that. Put Raheem above Gannon for me. Because Raheem, what they won like 9 games last year, right? Atlanta, at least. So like they were at least more competitive and more successful than Arizona. Yeah, Gannon's done nothing to improve Arizona one iota since they've stepped in the door. They're in the exact same situation that Arizona was in when he walked into the door.
Yeah. So I've got Gannon 24. You got him 26. Raheem Morris is 25 for you, 26 for me. And then Brian Callahan is 27 for both of us. Although it's, again, worth noting, first-year head coach that stepped into a terrible situation. Didn't do anything to make it better, but it's far too soon to like fully close the book on him. It wouldn't surprise me if the Titans do that at the end of this season, but there's not really a good way to talk about him at this point.
And I think just to wrap it up with the rookie head coaches, Brian Schottenheimer would be 32nd if we were throwing them in, no doubt about it. What a joke that he's a head coach of an NFL team. Ben Johnson, based on projecting, if I was just saying, look at this list, how many of these guys would you rather have this year than Ben Johnson? I think I'm saying 10.
That's about the number I had. Would you rather have LaFleur or Johnson?
I think I lean LaFleur.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure on that one, but I would definitely take Harbaugh
Really
and
similar,
everybody above on my list. Yeah.
I think they're really similar systems, actually. But I'd rather have him than Vrabel, because I mean, when he was being, I thought New England would have been a better hire to hire Johnson than Vrabel, and I love Vrabel. So yeah, I'd rather have him than Dan Campbell. I think I've made that clear. And then I look at Cohen and Moore about the same. I would rank the 5 rookie head coaches as Johnson, Moore, Cohen, Glenn, Schottenheimer. Cohen, I think, will be more successful than Moore.
I was going to say I would flip Cohen and Moore, but
I'm a believer in Moore, as you know. I was higher on his play calling than I think most Eagles fans were last season. I think he probably got a little bit too much blame when things went sour. But I think it obviously all worked out in the playoffs. So maybe I'm being biased, but I would probably put Cohen and Moore around 20. I'd rank them. They'd be after the top 24, just based on you don't know enough to put them higher than that, I'd say. And then Glenn and Schottenheimer would be near the bottom.
Yeah, I pretty well agree with that. I would probably rather have Cohen / Moore than Mike McDonald, Dan Quinn, Sean McDermott. But that's just taking the swing on upside. It's not that I necessarily think they're better coaches. And that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for joining us for episode number 195 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating wherever you stream your podcast. You can follow us on Twitter. I am at Shane Half NFL. He is at Mark Henry Jr., and we will catch you guys next time.